السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. الحمد لله رب العالمين حمدا يوافي نعمه ويكافئ مزيدا. يا ربي لك الحمد كما ينبغي لجلال وجهك ولعظيم سلطانك. صلى الله وسلم على سيدنا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه والتابعين لهم بإحسان إلى يوم الدين وعلينا معهم وفيهم برحمتك يا أرحم الراحمين. نوينا التعلم والتعليم. We intend learning and teaching, remembering and reminding, giving and receiving benefit and gain, encouraging adherence to Allah's book and the Sunnah of the Messenger of Allah, sallallahu alayhi wa alihi wa sallam, inviting to guidance and leading to goodness, seeking therein Allah's countenance, pleasure, nearness and reward, transcendent and exalted is He. We intend what our author, Shaykhs and the pious have intended and what Allah knows of virtuous intentions, and we ask Allah to accept. Barakallahu feekum. Hayyakum Allah. MashaAllah, la quwwata illa billah. How are you all hearing? Good, alhamdulillah. So I'm in the UAE right now. I'm on the road, inshallah ta'ala. Our lesson next week will likely be from the UK, assuming that conditions permit. And when we're on the road, connections sometimes require a little tinkering for them to be smooth for streaming. So we hope that this remains smooth, though based on the way the connection was in this house, it flickered a little bit yesterday. So if it flickers and I'm not back within 10 minutes, assume we'll continue next week, inshallah, or in the next session. And we appreciate everyone's patience. Hayyakumullah. So today we'll have a quick review of what we took last week. And there we discussed water. And we mentioned that there was a third categorization from the point of view of purifying. So after having reviewed what we discussed, we'll move in to that third categorization. So we'll continue to cover the subject of water today, insha'Allah ta'ala, covering the area of water that is impure, and also how water becomes impure, whether that quantity is large or small. And then we'll study impure substances or filth, which is what makes water and other things impure or soiled with filth, mutanajjis. And then, insha'Allah ta'ala, we may have a quick overview of how we remove filth from things, but I am inclined to believe that that's going to take place next week. So basically this week and next week, we're going to deal with an-najasat, which are types of filth, and how they are purified and how they affect water, essentially. La ilaha illallah. And maybe if Allah really blesses our time, we'll finish it all. Hayyakumullah. First of all, there was a question last week about used water, and we mentioned that a person could purify themselves in a bathtub, for instance, that was a small quantity of water. And if I step into a bathtub and intend lifting major ritual impurity, someone's in a state of major ritual impurity. They step in the bathtub and intend lifting major ritual impurity, and then sit down, and then after that lay down and submerge the rest of their body, then sit back up. At what point does the water in that bathtub become impure? When you get out, perfect. Yeah, when your body separates from it. So what that means is, if that person, after having purified themselves from major ritual impurity, lost their wudu sitting in the bathtub, then they could submerge the limbs of wudu and intend purification for prayer, and then they would have wudu. As long as the water continues to be attached to the thing it's purifying, it does not become used. So a question was asked in this regard: what if two people were purifying themselves, and to like an intermediate level, I didn't notice that the commentaries even discussed it. So I have to say Allahu A'lam. But in the case of removing filth, it doesn't work. So it's not unlikely that it would be similar. In any case, it's not a very likely question because it's difficult for two people to fit at the same time in a small quantity of water anyway. And my official answer on that is Allahu A'lam. And it's not advised from another point of view as well, that we're not going to go into right now. La ilaha illallah. Tayyib. So, we covered conditions of wudu. Tayyib. So, if someone makes wudu, what is the ruling if they have dirt under their fingernails? If they have dirt under their fingernails when they're making wudu, what is the ruling? Right, okay, tamam. It has to be removed, otherwise the wudu is not valid. Okay, so I gave you a few extra conditions. Which condition does that violate? Aywa, that there not be something that blocks the water on any part of the body. And you could also say, we mentioned a condition that water must run over the whole limb. So it breaks both of them, but it breaks it really more technically because it's blocking water to get into that part. Now, we mentioned that's a relied upon position and that there's also a difference of opinion there. So for past actions, or for those who are not strong or would be pushed away, it's not something to emphasize. But in terms of one's own practice, and caution is encouraged, one should be careful there. Another benefit of knowing various positions is it helps you cut waswasa too. Like if you find yourself micro-inspecting under your fingernails every time you finish wudu, and then going back and making it again, and then that happens again and again, or maybe sometimes you even do wudu 2 or 3 times, just to follow the difference of opinion and say, khalas, even if I had any grease under all of my fingernails, like a mechanic or something, my wudu would be valid on a position that can be followed in the school. So shut up, waswasa. I'm not going to listen to you no matter what. Sometimes you have to do that. Okay, so after that we discussed water and La ilaha illallah Muhammadur Rasulullah. So water. What were the conditions we gave you for used water? We gave you some conditions for used water. What were those? Okay, it's used for tahara. We have to be a little more technical than that. We have to be a little more technical than that. Because required to tahara, right? So it has to be used for something required. It has to be a small quantity of water. A large quantity of water won't become used. And it has to separate from the limb. That's correct. Amen? Khairun. So we'll continue inshaAllah ta'ala. Okay, so yesterday we mentioned that water can be categorized from one point of view in 3 categories. And that's from the point of view of its purity and its being purified. Sometimes they'll add another category that you're going to see maybe in some other texts or lessons, but a simple way to do it is to divide it into these 3 categories. We have water which is pure and purifying, al-tahir al-mutahhir, and they also call it al-tahur. We have water which is pure though not purifying, and we have impure water. So we covered last week the first 2. Water that is just plain water, pure and purifying. It's plain water that doesn't have any other qualification, and that's water as it falls from the sky or springs from the earth, however its natural state is. And then we have water which is pure though not purifying, and then that can be divided into 2 more categories. Either water which undergoes an extreme change that we're certain of due to something that water is typically free of, or used water, the conditions of which we just discussed. So then moving on to our third, that is the subject of our lesson this week, insha'Allah ta'ala. And our author says, Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Alhamdulillahi Rabbil Alameen. Wa sallallahu wa sallama ala Sayyidina Muhammad wa ala alihi wa sahbihi wa tabi'ina lahum bi ihsanin ila yawm ad-din wa alayna ma'ahum wa fihim bi rahmatika ya arhamar rahimin. Radiyallahu anhu wa nafa'ana bihi wa bikum. Ameen. فصل فيما ينجس الماء وينجس الماء القليل وغيره من المائعات ولو بتكميله قلتين بوقوع النجاسة فيه. So he said, and this is 1.12 in your handout. Inshallah everyone has that. How a small quantity of water becomes impure. And you have najas, and they use that, but also oftentimes, and perhaps it's more technically accurate or more descriptive, we'll say mutanajjis. So it becomes affected by filth. A small quantity, so it goes on in 1. Actually, we want to define the term there. So with your heading 1.12, we've understood that water is in a large and small quantity. We're going to go into that in much more detail now, inshallah. And then it becomes impure, najis or mutanajis, and basically we have this category of things that are called najasat, and we're going to study a pretty thorough list of them in a moment, inshallah. And najasa, which can be translated as filth, but here we mean things that are legally filthy in the sacred law, is simply defined as any filth that prevents the validity of prayer when there is no dispensation. So what we mean by legal filth, najasa, is any filth which prevents the validity of prayer when there's no dispensation. So sometimes there's going to be a dispensation, and then in that case, that's fine. However, it's still filth, but then we consider it excused filth, and we're going to discuss that as well. So again, filth is legal filth. Najasa is any filth that prevents the validity of prayer when there's no dispensation. And basically, when filth touches something or is on something, that thing that it touches or thing that is on, if you need to pray in that, you have to purify it prior to doing so. Otherwise, your prayer won't be valid. And then, if filth touches something and there's moisture on either side with conditions, even if the filth itself doesn't transfer to that thing, the ruling of being legally filthy or legally soiled by filth transfers to the thing that was initially pure. So like if one of my hands was impure, say I had bled, and my other hand touches it, if they're dry, it's no problem. However, if they're wet, then, and I go like this, then even if no traces of blood or no smell or color or taste of blood transferred to the hand that was initially pure, a ruling of being legally filthy, of being mutanajjis, has transferred from one hand to the other because they came in contact and there was moisture on either side. So that, for us to pray, becomes a matter of concern because, as we'll see when we deal with the conditions of prayer, being bodily pure and physically pure is one of the conditions. So we have to know what these impure things are, how they affect other things, and how those things are purified from them. So that's essentially what we're going to discuss this morning, inshallah, or evening, perhaps for some of you. And then you'll remember as well when we began this chapter of purification, we mentioned aims or objectives of purification, and also means. So last week we were discussing the principal means, and we'll continue a little bit now, and that's water. And then in terms of the aims of purification, we've discussed wudu and ghusl, and then this is the third one, and that is removing filth. And then what remains will be the fourth one. So basically, we're covering today the third aim of purification, and then continue with matters that relate to the first of the means of purification, which is water. So then our author goes on. And he says, a small quantity of water, or any quality of another liquid, is made impure by filth falling into it, even if the filth completes 216 liters. This is the case whether the filth changes the water or not. Okay, so basically, water, from the point of view of how it becomes impure, how it becomes affected by filth, or contaminated by filth, you can divide it into two categories. Either a small quantity of water, which is what we're going to discuss now, or a large quantity of water, which we're going to discuss in point 2. So here he's teaching us how a small quantity of water, or any other liquid, even if it's a large quantity, becomes affected by filth. Okay, so how do we define a small quantity of water? A small quantity of water is less than 216 liters approximately. So 216 liters is the threshold between, or 216 is the threshold between water being a small quantity and a large quantity. What's above 216 or above is considered a large quantity of water. So all of the rulings of a large quantity of water relate to that. And what's less than 216 liters is considered a small quantity of water. And if it's 216 approximately, so there's a slight difference, slightly less, that's okay, but not a significant a significant deficiency. And then an easy way to calculate 216 liters by estimation is that in a cubical vessel, 216 liters is a cubit and a quarter cubed. A cubit and a quarter. I just want to double check that my memory's not failing me there. There you are. A cubit and a quarter cubed. So what's a cubit? I said it was easy and that sounded difficult. A cubit is, actually I measured it once too. From my finger to my elbow is a cubit. And this is how they used to measure it. In Arabic it's dhira, which is literally a forearm. So you could say an average length forearm and a quarter cubed. So like if I were to take from here to here and then add about a quarter of that in all three dimensions, length, width, and depth, that cube would be 216 liters. Maybe someone has short arms, maybe someone has real long arms. A cubit, and maybe if someone has Reliance of the Traveler right on the desk where they're studying, they could pull it up from volumetric measurements. It's about 48 some centimeters. So if you say 50 centimeters cubed, you're real safe. Or 50 centimeters in each direction. A cube is 15 centimeters in each direction. And if we're in a round vessel, then it is 2 cubits deep, so about 100 cubits deep, and a cubit and a half across, so about 75 across. So about 75 centimeters by 1 meter. A cylinder shape like that will be about 216 liters. So it's smaller than you would think. When you hear 216, you think it's real huge, but actually, it's not that huge of a container. Some bathtubs will probably reach it. Certainly, anything that's like looking like a small hot tub, you're fine at that point. Inshallah. If someone could shoot me what a cubit is, that'll help. So he says that the small quantity of water or any quantity of another liquid becomes impure by filth falling into it. And we could say more precisely, by filth contacting it. However, that is with conditions. So when filth contacts a small quantity of water, even the moisture on our bodies, that water becomes impure, as does any other liquid, with conditions. So what are those conditions? The conditions for water becoming impure by contacting filth, and inshallah these can be posted for your notes today. Someone will do that after maybe giving them a quick proof, inshallah. The conditions for water becoming impure by contacting filth are 4. 1, that it be a small amount of water, right? Less than 216 liters. 2, that we are certain of the contact, and that's absolutely certain. 3, that the water not come onto the filth, or be poured onto the filth, or be introduced to the filth. Otherwise, we couldn't wash things from filth, wash away filth with a small quantity of water. So this condition, the water coming onto the filth or over the filth or gushing up to the filth, the opposite of it is if you have a bucket of water and you throw filth in it, or throw something filthy in it. But here what we're saying is, no, you have something filthy in a bucket of water and you pour water, you have something filthy in a bucket that's empty and you pour water onto it. That's what we mean here. That the water not come onto or over or emit up to the filth, or you could say that the water not come to the filth. And the 4th condition, that the filth not be excused. And we're going to study in just a moment a number of types of filth that are excused in water. So with those 4 conditions, water will become impure by contacting filth, or any moisture that contacts filth, that moisture will become impure. If one of those conditions is not fulfilled, then we don't give the water a ruling of filth. So again, the first is that it's a small quantity as opposed to a large quantity. You you find a dead mouse in a large quantity of water, it's still pure. Two, that we're certain of the contact. That means absolutely certain. Over and over again when we were studying these books and these chapters of the text, our teachers would say, La nunajjisu bishak. We don't give a ruling of filth if there's any doubt. La ibra bishak. Shak is of no consideration. Doubt is of no consideration. And we mentioned that actually they say it's the most important maxim, or one of the 4 most important maxims of the sacred law, is that certainty is not removed by doubt. So you can't give a legal ruling of something being soiled by filth if there's any doubt. And the threshold of certainty here means absolute certainty. You can't make assumptions. The example they give is like if there's a bucket here, and there's a dog or dogs around the bucket, and one of them puts their nose below the rim of the bucket and lifts it out, and the bucket is opaque. For instance, if it were glass, then you could see what was going on. But say it's metal, and you look closely at the nose or mouth of the dog and it looks moist. You still can't rule that water impure because you didn't see whether or not the dog contacted it. And that's what they mean by certainty. So the moisture could be because the dog licked its nose or panted or whatever, and they do that. And he could have smelled the water and not liked something about it and not drunk from it. So when there's any doubt, you can't give a ruling of filth. And we're emphasizing that point because really to be good at fiqh, you have to think like a faqih. And not like, oh, well, that's what I always would assume, or that's what physicists or chemists would say. That's what halal, such and such board on their halal haram says, and I've always been doing that, so therefore, no. You got to think like the sacred law would have you think. And it comes from revelation, and it has its own discipline. Okay, so the third condition, then the water not come onto the filth. Again, what we mean there is you can't take your clothes that are soiled with urine from a baby, for instance, and throw them into a bucket of water. Then the filth is coming to the water. But you could put them in a bucket that was empty, or a vessel like a washing machine, and then pour water into it, and with conditions, even if that's a small quantity of water, it will still remain pure. So when water comes, it may be okay, provided certain conditions are met that we'll cover, inshallah, next week. And then the fourth condition, again, is that the filth not be excused. So with those 4 conditions, water, a small quantity of water, becomes impure when it merely comes in contact with filth. And then he goes on to say, even if the filth completes 216 liters. What does this mean? It means you have 200 liters of water and 6 liters of urine. That's a problem. As opposed to 216 liters of water and you pour 6 liters of urine into it. That's okay, as long as it doesn't change, as we'll see. But if you have filth plus water that adds up to 216 liters, that's not okay. And he goes on to say, this is the case whether the filth changes the water or not. So in a small quantity of water, change isn't an issue. We don't consider change, as opposed to a large quantity of water, as we'll see. That's the relied upon position of the school, and that's one of the tough rulings in the Shafi'i school, actually. That's an azima, that's a strictness. Imam Malik's school and Imam al-Shafi'i's early school, his qadim, they view that a small quantity of water won't become impure as long as it doesn't change. And some of our imams, like Ad-Damiri, he said, قال الإمام إن أحسن المسالك في المياه ما فيه مالك سالك. So some of the later Shafi'is actually prefer Imam Malik's position. for reasons. And bear that in mind in your life, especially if you're someone with waswasa. But generally, it's encouraged to follow the way of strictness, and Allah is al-Muwaffaq. Are there any questions on that before we move on to point 2? For Sidi Muhammad Ramli's first question, if I understand it correctly, there's a filthy spot on clothing that didn't touch the water, and then the clothing's removed before the water touches it. In that case, that's not a water hasn't contacted filth, so it's a non-issue. Now, the washing machines that I've observed, and I've actually tested some, like tasting the water at certain cycles, the water comes on to the clothing. Though people commonly will fill up the washer, especially if they're using bleach or something, and mix in detergent and bleach or whatever in order to make it dissolve better, and then throw the clothes in, that all becomes impure. However, most washers that I've experienced have 2 rinse cycles. And certainly the second rinse cycle isn't going to be changed by any soap, but even I've tested the first in some, and I wouldn't say that it was changed. So you should still be okay even if you have to do it that way. Discernible and indiscernible filth? Not necessarily, and we'll go into more detail there. Indiscernible filth can still be washed in a washing machine, provided the conditions are fulfilled for removal of filth. What do I mean by moisture that contacts filth? I mean that, actually, can you wait on that question until we've gone through the list of filth? And it might become a little more clear, inshallah. Ask me again, because it'll probably swim up in the chat and get lost. Yeah, water doesn't have to pour directly onto the spot, and it doesn't have to come from the top. Fuqaha mentioned explicitly that it can come from the bottom, which is, I believe, the case you're going to find in a washing machine. And actually, Shaykh ibn Hajar in his fatwa said, if we have a vessel that's impure, with a whole bunch of impure objects in it, and you cover you pour water into the vessel so that everything is covered, it all becomes pure. And that's exactly the scenario of a washing machine. You have impure objects, maybe even the vessel itself is impure because of previous washing, like a previous washing or whatever that was changed or whatever, and then water fills up the whole thing, provided that the conditions of purification are fulfilled, that we're going to touch probably in the next lesson. The whole thing, the whole system becomes pure. And there's a scenario that's almost entirely analogous to our washing machines that Ibn Hajar gave fatwa on. So we're going to move on to number 2. Okay, number 2, he said, the following are excused. And excuse me, I've been talking about a large quantity of water was going to be covered in point 2. A large quantity of water is going to be covered in 1.13. The following are excused. Okay, so here he's going to mention a number of things that are excused in water. So when we defined filth, we said legal filth is any filth that prevents the validity of prayer when there's no dispensation. And there's dispensations for some filth. They're called excused types of filth, al-ma'fuat, and the discussion is very long. And when you get into the bigger books and the longer books of fiqh, most of the discussion, or much of the discussion, is of this area. And I'm emphasizing this point because sometimes in these small texts, they don't introduce a lot of detail and exception, so you feel like you kind of live in a narrow world of najasa. But for other reasons, you don't. And we'll try to emphasize those at the relevant points. But even beyond that, keep in the back of your mind that yani إِذَا ضَاقَ الْأَمْرُ اتَّسَعَ. There's a maxim of the sacred law. When things become constrained, they expand. And Allah said that He doesn't want any constriction upon us in the deen, or any difficulty upon us in the deen. So there's a general rule of thumb that everything that is difficult to avoid is excused. And then these are details, and that's with conditions, but that's a general rule that Imam Ramli mentioned in Yahya. And you'll find that in the Q&A archives, of some discussion of that in the Q&A archives on Sunni Path, or now Qibla.com. May Allah bless that effort. So these are some of those types of najasa that are excused. Okay, one more point before we read these. So we have najasa that's excused, and also excused najasa, we can divide it into three categories. Najasa that is excused in water and not prayer. Right? So it means it won't make matter impure, but it can't be on your body or clothes or place of prayer. And we're going to discuss that as we proceed in this text, inshallah. Then we have a second category, najasa that is excused in prayer and not in water. So it can be on your body in prayer, but if it goes into a small quantity of water, it'll make it impure. And then we have najasa that's neither excused in water or prayer. So here we're covering the first, najasa that is excused in water and not prayer. And actually we have a fourth category, excuse me. There's four categories. Najasa excused in water and not prayer. Najasa excused in prayer and not water. Najasa excused in neither prayer nor in water. And najasa that's excused in both. So sometimes it'll only be excused in water, sometimes it'll only be excused in prayer, sometimes it's not excused, and sometimes it's excused in both. So an example of what's excused in water and not prayer is like a dead animal without flowing blood, which is our second one, like a fly. You can't pray with a fly in your pocket, but if a dead fly falls into your bucket of small quantity of water, it doesn't make it impure. An example of something that's excused in prayer and not in water is like blood. And we'll cover that, inshallah, in some detail. Blood being on your body is excused with conditions. However, a drop of blood that you're sure follows into a small quantity of water will make it impure. Najasa that's not excused in either, that's generally all najasa, unless they teach us an exception. And the najasa that's excused in both is like our third example. Filth which cannot be perceived by normal vision, meaning it's such a small quantity that it can't be perceived by normal vision. Okay, so he said the following are excused. A small amount of impure hair. Impure hair? Hair can be impure. The hair that comes off animals that are not edible is impure. And also, like the hair of a donkey, though it's excused in water, and it can be excused in prayer too, especially for someone who has to ride it. And the hair that is from unslaughtered dead, as well as all other parts of its body, is also impure. A dead, though again a small quantity of it is excused. A dead animal without flowing blood. So what does that mean? That means if someone cut off one of its limbs, poor thing, and it's not permissible to do that because it's harming it it's harming it for no reason, and no blood flows, then it's considered without flowing blood. So like insects are in this category, and even geckos actually are in that category. Things smaller than a gecko Things larger than a gecko simply aren't. Mice aren't, like rodents and stuff aren't in that category. But basically insects and small reptilia are. So you find, like, and that's with conditions, that it not be deliberate, that it not change it, and so on. So like if a fly falls into your bucket of water, or you find some other dead insects, ants for instance, those are excused. Filth which cannot be perceived by normal vision. لا يدركه الطرف المعتدل. So someone with average vision can't see it because it's so small when it happens, but you know it happened. Right? Like if some najis liquid splashed and you could feel specks, tiny specks hit your hand, and you looked immediately and you felt the coolness, but you didn't see it because it was so small that you couldn't see it. That's excused. And that's excused again in body and prayer. The orifice of a bird or a mouse. Basically that means little animals don't have to make istinja. If there's a bird bathing in a bird bath or something, any birds don't make istinja, right? Well, it's still pure. It's excused. And what we mean by being excused is when that contacts the water, it doesn't make the water impure. Just on that. Even if like it's water on your hands, for instance. If water on your hands, you get a little bit of impure hair on it, just pull it off, and it's excused, and the water remains pure. A small amount of dust from dung. So like if it becomes pulverized and dusty and the wind blows and you're sweaty, it's stuck to you, that's excused. And even after you wiped it off, it's still excused. It doesn't make it contaminated with filth. And the saliva of a cat, this applies to a cat. It also applies to other things like a child or someone who is insane or other animals. But they just mentioned the example of a cat. The saliva of a cat that ate filth then disappeared, and it was possible that it had drunk from 216 liters of water. Right? So basically you see a cat eat a rat that it killed. That rat is impure. It's unslaughtered dead. So you know the cat's mouth now is najis. And then the cat, for instance, might lick you sometimes when you're feeding it or something. You saw it eat the rat, and then it disappeared. Maybe it drank from your neighbor's fish pond, or maybe it drank from, whatever. It's possible that it could have drunk from a large quantity of water, or a small quantity of flowing water. Then it is excused. Another thing that's excused, no, we're not going to actually probably add too many more. Just we'll add that the general rule is that everything that's difficult to avoid is excused with 3 conditions. That it not be from major filth, like from dog or pig, that it not be deliberate, and that it not change the thing that it affects. And there's exceptions to each of those. So what it means by change is like if you have so many dead insects fall into a bucket that they change the water and taste, color, smell, they're no longer excused. But with those conditions, anything that's difficult to avoid, even if it's not mentioned explicitly by the jurists, is excused. And Allah knows best. Dog hair, Allahu Alam. Let me double check that. That's what is apparent from the statements of the fuqaha, that that's hair that's najis. But I just want to I want to review that in a longer text as well, because I haven't come across the question before. Yeah, no. If you could just post for them what a cubit is in centimeters exactly. It's like 46 or 48, I think there's a difference. Okay, wait a second. I want to cover these questions before we move on to section 2. Okay. Allah yashfik. So Sidi Muhammad Ramli said, isn't the origin of hair purity? Do we have to be sure it came from live or unslaughtered dead for it to be impure? Certainty, the origin of hair is purity. So if we don't know if the hair came from a pure or an impure animal, or we didn't know if it's separated during the life or the death of the animal, we assume purity because that's the origin. For hair and bone, the origin is purity, as opposed to flesh of animals. What about alcohol that is found in many products? We're going to discuss liquid intoxicants a little bit in a minute. Is that an example of something difficult to avoid? It could be. It could be. That needs more research and also more detail in the case of what we're talking about. I wouldn't say, and I'll just say there, Allahu Alam, that needs kind of more research as well. Is the cat's mouth excused, or people are just excused from La ilaha illallah. I don't understand the question about is the cat's mouth excused, or are people just excused from achieving certainty that the filth was removed? Honestly, the upshot of the two would seem to be the same. A cubit is 48 centimeters. Yeah, okay. So 48 centimeters. A cube that's 48 centimeters on each side is a large quantity of water. Yep. The things that are excused in the first category. Okay, so what about them? If you know the cat's mouth didn't contact water, then it's not excused, because he said it became impure and then disappeared, and it's possible that it contacted water, then it's excused. If it didn't disappear and you saw it the whole time, it's still impure. Now, we mentioned licking. They excuse the mouths of a number of creatures from that point of view, and it's not unlikely that if it was difficult to avoid, that the cat would be as well. From another point of view. Yeah. is the kist on the notes is from that category. The list on the notes. This list is what's excused in water. Some of it's also excused in prayer, but not necessarily all of it. Okay, so that's a list of things that are excused in water. They deal with the things that are excused in prayer when we cover removal of filth from one's body, clothes, in place of prayer, in the conditions of prayer. Yeah, I understand the question. Yep, that's one of the exceptions. So we said that everything difficult to avoid is excused with 3 exceptions. One, that it not be from major filth, or 3 conditions. One of them, that it not be from major filth, and we said there's an exception to each condition. The exception from it being from major filth is filth that's so small you can't discern it. That's excused even as from major filth. If where the filth was can be seen, is how if the color is removed, can we still see where the filth was? It matters sometimes, but in filth it doesn't. And for you, Sidi, don't worry about it. Just khalas. If I'm not 100% sure, خلاص ما في نجاسة. Not yet, inshallah. Wait till we go over this list of filth, inshallah. We want to move along to, actually. We need to move along a little bit today. Okay, so that's a small quantity of water. Small quantity of water with those 4 conditions, if filth contacts it, will become impure. That we're certain of the contact, that it's a small quantity of water, that we're certain of the contact, that the water not come onto the filth, and that the filth not be excused. And then you have here a list of some of the things that are excused in water. Some of these are also excused in prayer, though not necessarily all of them. They deal with what's excused in prayer in that place. And we'll give you that filth that's so small that can't be perceived by normal vision is also excused in prayer. So even if we don't cover that again, that's excused in prayer as well. Okay, so then he says 1.13, the ruling of water when filth falls into it. And this is somewhat redundant due to my deference to the author. I didn't change this heading, but were I to want to tinker with it more, I would say how a large quantity of water becomes impure. Right? So here in 1.13 we're dealing with how a large quantity of water becomes pure as opposed to a small quantity of water, which we just covered. So he says, if filth falls into 216 liters of water, it does not become impure unless its taste, color, or smell changes, whether the change is much or little, with the condition that you're certain of the change. Okay, so we have a big vat of water, and this is common in the Muslim world historically. That the mosque, for instance, would have vats for, or cisterns or whatever, for people doing wudu and ghusl. Then today, alhamdulillah, they actually still have them. They're called jawabi, the plural of jabiyah. So, say a rat falls in it and dies and decomposes. Yuck. If the water now smells even faintly like the decomposed rat, or the smell or the color changes, and we're certain of the change, it's impure. If we're not certain, it's still pure. Basically, that's what he's saying. That's what he's saying. Same thing. Huge quantity of water mixed with urine, for instance. Same thing. Once there's a slight change that we're certain of, it's impure. Until that point, it remains pure. And then he said, if the change disappears by itself or by the addition of water, then it becomes pure again. So 216 liters is the magic number. Prophet ﷺ said that if water reaches 206, if water reaches what's called kullatan, which means like two large vessels of water, two large vats of water, it does not carry filth. And in one narration, la yanjus, la yanjus. So when we have 260 liters of water, 216 liters of water, and actually it's a nice story. How did we find out that these two vessels, kullatan, two large vats or two large jugs, is 216 liters? So kulla was like a large vat that they would have, a large vessel that they would keep water in. And the Prophet ﷺ, in his time, there was this town in Al-Hijaz called Al-Hajar. And there's actually weak narrations to that effect, but also in Medina, they got their vats from Hajar. So Imam al-Shafi'i, who again was more than a century later, he was in 150 to 204. And at the time he was doing his ijtihad, it would have been, around like 270-ish or later. So he said, okay, then, 170-ish or later. He said, okay, then how big is the qulla, is the vats, are the vats that are made in Hajar? So someone said that was 200 and some ratals, which was a weight measurement. So the weight of the water in there would be 200 and some ratals. And in the Arabic, miyatan wa shay is what he said, 200 and some. In Arabic, shay and some is from 1 to 50, right? From in terms of hundreds, it's up to half. So then he estimated high, and he said, then we'll say that one vat is 250 ratals, what weighed that much, and then two vats would be 500. So a large quantity of water is 500 ratlan baghdadiyan fil asah, in the soundest position. 500 ratals in the sound position. So when they weigh what a ratal is, and if you want to see a ratal, you can look in Reliance of the Traveler how much it weighs. So when you weigh that, the volume that comes out to is 216 liters approximately. So that's from the ijtihad of Imam al-Shafi'i with the prophetic statements. And actually the schools differ. And that's a good example of why there are juristic differences, because kullatan is a probabilistic figure. And the Prophet ﷺ made that statement, but later, in the time that these imams or later generations are doing their ijtihad, it becomes probabilistic. At his time in the market, there's probably those kullas and everybody knew what they were, but later we have to try to make ijtihad to find it out, and the figure that we come to isn't unequivocal. It's a probabilistic figure, so there's likely to be difference there. In any case, that's a large quantity of water. 216 liters is the magic number. So if you have 216 liters and it becomes impure, it's yucky, it smells, and then it just sits and disappears, it becomes pure again. Or if we have a whole bunch of buckets of small quantities of water that are impure and we add them all together till they become 216, it's also pure. Or we have a large quantity that's impure and we add extra clean water and then the change vanishes by itself, or with the addition of water, then it's pure. Naam. And alhamdulillah wa shukrulillah ala dhalik. Also, I believe we mentioned this, but if we didn't, and for review, also if you have used water, a whole bunch of small quantities of used water, and you add it all together until it's 216 liters, that also becomes purifying again. So it was pure but unpurifying, but it becomes purifying again once it's gathered together in 216 liters of water. And this question about the change disappearing by itself, that relates to the question that people asked last week about reclaimed water. However, remember that that is if it's remember that in the first section we said if filth completes 216 liters, then it's not okay. So if you have, a vessel of water, and there's water plus liquid filth, and the water is less than 216 liters, but it's completed to being that with the liquid filth, then that's going to be an issue, and that would be one of the problems that has to be solved in reclaiming water, that you're sure that there's a sufficient quantity of water, because it's going to be mixed with other things. But honestly, given the quantities they're dealing with, my inclination is that it's fine. And I'm sure that if you were to really kind of look at it, you'd find that they use probably tougher criteria than the jurists would use with respect to that, especially if they think people are really drinking it again. And then point 3, 1.13.3 is, if it does not become pure, it does not become pure if the change subsides by the addition of musk, saffron, gypsum, or earth. Basically, if you just cover the change, it was a change in smell and you put musk in it, or a change in color and you put earth in it, then it doesn't become pure. Interestingly enough, though, if you can't see the change anymore, and then it contacts something else, it doesn't make that thing impure, because we're not certain. It might be pure now, and it might not. So we were certain of its impurity, and we're uncertain of it having returned to purity, so it doesn't have the ruling of being pure. However, because we're not sure that it's still pure, it won't make other things impure. And Allah knows best. La ilaha illallah. Today we want to move along and just go through these types of filth real quick. And we're probably going to come back over how to purify, and probably move forward a little bit next week, inshallah. So also we can revisit this list of types of filth. So it says 1.14 types of filth. So we gave a definition of legal filth and najasa earlier. It's any filth which prevents the validity of prayer when there's no dispensation. That's like a ta'rif bil had. That's defining it. But we can also describe it just by listing it. And they say in filth, because there's a limited number, that's a better way to define it. It's just by listing. So pay attention to the list more than you pay attention to the definition. This is essentially what they say with respect to this. Okay, the various kinds of filth are, there's some tajawuz there. There's a little slight lack of precision there, because number 18 is actually not filth. So that needs to be tinkered with, but again, we were kind of honoring the order of this author. He said urine. Okay, all types of urine are impure. Some of them are light filth, and we'll deal with that. Stool, dung. Dung is impure even of edible animals, on the relied upon position of the Shafi'i school. The Jumhur, the majority of scholars, and a weak position in the Shafi'i school, say that the dung of an edible animal like a cow is pure, but the relied upon position is that it's impure. So don't be too hard on farmers. There's a difference of opinion there, and they need that. Vomit, akramakumullah. Babies spit up when their mouth is affected by it and they nurse from their mother, or they kiss people, or people kiss them, or their drool. Their saliva and their mouth is excused. Blood. Blood is impure, though, as we mentioned, there's a long discussion of how blood is excused when we talk about purity of body, clothing, and place of prayer. Pus as well. Wine from grapes. Wine from dates and raisins. He mentioned both just because of a difference of opinion with other schools. Number 9 is really the more technical way of discussing it. Liquid intoxicants. Notice that none of this is alcohol. We didn't say alcohol for any of these. The issue is, does it intoxicate or not? Not whether it's technically defined as an alcohol, which is an organic compound with a hydroxyl group, an OH group on it. Many quote-unquote alcohols, as defined by chemists, have nothing to do with intoxication. and they have nothing to do with purity from that point of view. As we said, you got to think like a jurist, not like a chemist. What we mean when we talk about khamar, which is literally wine, is liquid intoxicant. A liquid that intoxicates, that is impure. And a generic alcohol, the assumption of every object is purity until we know otherwise. So, tert, quad, butyl, isopropic alcohol or something that's in your mouthwash. The assumption is pure. Just because it says alcohol doesn't mean anything. That's a category of organic chemicals. What is impure are liquids that intoxicate. Dogs and pigs. Dogs and pigs are impure bodily during their life. All other animals are pure during their life. The offspring of either of them or a combination of them. So, like if a dog and a pig, if it's conceivable that a dog and a pig mated, and there was an offspring that was half dog, or and half pig, or also a dog and another animal, and that happens sometimes. If they mate, then the offspring are given the same ruling as a dog and has major filth. Unslaughtered dead animals. So carrion is basically unslaughtered dead. Every animal whose life every animal that dies without a proper Islamic slaughtering. So a deer on the side of the road, stuff like that. Rats that get caught in a trap, anything like that. Even if it was edible and pure, slaughtered, when it is unslaughtered, it's impure. The hair, feathers, hides, and every part of them. So an unslaughtered dead animal, every part of it is impure. And its hide is mutanajjis due to death. So its hide is given the ruling of filth through death. And as we'll cover, the hide can be purified later. Pre-ejaculatory fluid, medhi. Wadi, I left untranslated. If someone could glance at Reliance of the Translator and see if Shaykh, Reliance of the Traveler, mashallah, it should be called Reliance of the Translator, and Allah preserve Shaykh Nu, and see if it is translated. I think he might have left it untranslated. Basically, we have semen and female sexual fluid, which is called mani. And that's what comes out with pleasure in bursts, and has the smell of bread dough when wet and egg whites when dried. So many is defined by those three things: coming out, its exit being associated with pleasure, coming out in burst, and having that characteristic odor. Then we have two other fluids that, particularly in the case of the man, but also in number 15, that occurs with the woman, that come out of their private area, and they're all similar, and these two are impure, and they make you have to perform wudu. Mani is pure, and it makes you have to perform ghusl. So pre-ejaculatory fluid is what comes out when a person's aroused, and it's thick and clear, and wadi is like a thick white substance that comes out after one urinates. Especially it might occur if one carries something heavy. So 15 and 16, they're impure and they invalidate wudu. And as opposed to many is pure and it makes you have to perform ghusl. Though we mentioned it doesn't invalidate wudu, even if you can't do much with that wudu because you have to make ghusl, which is more severe. 17, the semen of dogs and pigs. Okay, why did he say that? He said that because the semen of pure animals is pure. It's their origin. It's like the origin of our body, so it's pure. The milk of animals other than humans that may not be eaten. So cat milk. Cat milk is impure, as opposed to edible animals. Goat milk, cow milk. If we say you can eat llamas, which would appear to be the case because it's like a camel, llama milk, those are all pure. Dead human, fish, and locusts are pure, and that's the one that needs a little tinkering, inshallah. Those are exceptions. A severed part from an animal other than humans, fish, and locusts is filth. Okay, you know another way you can define ruling 19? The severed part of an animal has the same ruling as its unslaughtered dead. That's another way you can define it. Some books do it that way. So if an animal, part of it comes off, we look at it. If that animal were dead without slaughtering, would that animal be impure? If so, the part is impure. If not, not. And that's why I said other than humans, fish, and locusts. Because humans, fish, and locusts, when they're dead without slaughtering, they remain pure. No, there's an exception. Except the hair of an animal that may be eaten, or its feathers, fur, wool, or musk. Right? So, wool is fine if it is sheared during the life of the animal. Cow hair. When we say fur, actually, we're translating wabr, which is the fur of camels. Musk that comes off of a gazelle during its life, that's pure. And there's some detail there that we didn't mention. If you're reading the Arabic text, you'll see also the sack of the musk and so forth. That's all pure. And Allah knows best. And we could take a few questions, but soon people are going to begin rustling around here, so we can't go as late as we would have. Ewa, barakallah feek. What alcohol intoxicates? The alcohol that is in what we drink is ethyl alcohol. It's grain alcohol. But don't worry about which alcohol intoxicates. Yeah, I guess ethyl. If you see ethyl, that's grain alcohol. That's straight grain alcohol. So that's an issue. Shaykh Hamza Karam Ali from Qibla, he had some research for him. They're a chemist or a doctor or something. Like a long list of alcohols. And pretty much none of them were intoxicating except the one that's in like alcoholic drinks. And a lot of them were just like poison. And then some they said maybe you would get intoxicated before you went in a coma. But all of that, like with the fuqaha, khalas, yeah. What are we talking about? We're talking about alcoholic beverages. We're not talking about a chemical categorization for some organic compounds. Just put that in your mind. And then if you see ethyl, that's basically straight up grain alcohol. That's what's in wine and stuff that makes you drunk. If one is using washing machine and the color, taste, or smell is removed, however... So I didn't understand Tariq's question. I don't understand how you would be able to see where the filth was if the substance of the filth itself as well as its color was removed. And the substance has to be removed as well. So, it's a good time to ask about moisture contacting filth. Okay, now is a good time about moisture contacting filth, now that we've seen the list of filth. And if we could wait to send questions, I'm going to go through this list and then I'll clear it and then you can post more. Except that one for Shaheed. Does use water become impure if it contacts filth by coming onto it? That's a great question. I've not heard it asked before. I have to research that, inshallah ta'ala. If the person who's kind of fulfilling TA functions could email me that one to remind me to double check that. That would be helpful. On a white garment where there are the filth, I don't understand. On a white garment where the filth was is almost see-through. Why is it almost see-through? Like it was scrubbed so much that that area became almost see-through so you could distinguish it? Does a change have to occur to taste, color, and smell, or just taste? Yet any of them. The change occurring to any one of them, or more. Burn dung, the smoke of it is excused. Wadi, non-sperm male discharge, sure. Thick, cloudy, white fluid comes out after urine. Jamil, what about if you do, what if you do ghusl, ghusl's with a ghain, then make salah and some wadi comes out, do you have to make your salah again? If anything exits during prayer, it invalidates your, breaks your wudu. And then, oh, you know what, Sidi? For Jamil, I believe this question is if you do ghusl and then some mani comes out, more semen exits. And then do you have to make prayer? If I've understood the question correctly, if you make ghusl and mani comes out, semen, or wadi, or anything else after the prayer, that prayer is valid, and then we're going to, depending on what comes out, you're going to have to purify yourself again for the next prayer. If it is mani, if it is semen that came out more after having done ghusl, you have to do ghusl again. For that reason, they say it's sunnah to urinate prior to doing ghusl, to make sure that everything has exited. And also sometimes you have to take some time and so forth and take some measures to make sure everything's exited, so that when you do ghusl, nothing else comes out, no more semen comes out. And then if you're talking about wadi and it came out after the prayer, you just have to make wudu again and wash anything that it got on because it's impure. The Shafis don't differentiate between synthetic liquid intoxicants as opposed to those that are natural. And as far as them being in things, I don't want to go into it in much detail here. That's an area that it is a toughie. I advise people not to be too narrow about adhering to the Shafi school in that regard, because you do have a difference of opinion there in the Hanafi that helps you. And personally, I believe it needs research anyway because of the prevalence of alcohols and of liquid intoxicant alcohol in flavorings and so forth. I believe it needs more research. There might even be a dispensation in the Shafi school for it. Does hides, hair, and feathers include those used in clothing? Yeah. Now, whether or not they're pure goes back to our rulings. And the assumption of feathers and hair is their purity. And then, as we'll see, leather is pure once it's tanned. Is there a rukhsah one could take regarding dogs in the case of visiting non-Muslim family members who own dogs and who may brush onto one's garments, making it difficult to pray? Okay, that's a good time to talk about Shahid's question. And I don't see more there. Okay. So we said, if you have an object that is filth or affected by filth, and another object is pure, and the two come together and there's moisture on either side, the filth itself and the ruling of being affected by filth transfers to the pure object. So when you have filth contact something pure, or something affected by filth, something impure contacting something pure, if there's moisture on either side, that other thing becomes impure, as opposed to when it's dry. Two dry things coming in contact do not transfer impurity, and there's no difference of opinion regarding them. Al-jafu ma'al-jafu la yunajjisu bila khilaf. My first 5 teachers taught me that. So now going up to Sumayya's question. So dog brushing up against you when it's dry, it doesn't make your clothing impure or your body impure. You might have to brush off the hairs. And if the TA could also, excuse me, that question, I'm just going to double check whether even hairs from major filth, a small amount of them are excused. It appears to be the case, but I'm going to double check it. Now, so for Sidi Shahid, what's not clear about that of something, water or something moist contacting filth, after having seen that list of filth? So, like, yeah. Yep. Yeah. Any moisture. Yeah. Yep. Whether it's sweat, it doesn't have to be water. It could be sweat. It could be wet lotion. Whatever. Anything wet that there's moisture on either side. And notice in the talking about the small quantity, any liquid that filth contacts, like cooking oil, it becomes an issue. Irrespective of the amount of wetness, no, not irrespective. Moisture that separates transfers filth, and I'm glad you asked that. Basically, like if say you had something like a towel that was moist, but if you touched it against your skin and looked at it, you couldn't see any moisture on your hand, but it felt moist, and water contacted it, in the last hours, so there's a little moisture left. Moisture that doesn't separate doesn't count here. But moisture that will separate, like you touched the one thing, the other, and you lift it off, and you see the moisture on the other side, that's what we mean here. And if you think about that, it goes back also to the ruling of filth that is perceptible by a normal glance. So moisture that doesn't separate is not perceptible by a normal glance. So from that point of view, it's going to be excused there. So, but sweat on your hands, and the reason that's important, because like someone that has waswasa, that has unfounded misgivings, they're going to say, well, typically, there's moisture in the air everywhere, and your skin always has some moisture. And I've actually had someone ask me that, so it does become an issue. But if it's sweat on your hands that you could feel sweaty, and then you touch the next one and you can see sweat go over there, then that's an issue. To answer your question, you asked me a few days ago. Yes, I'm still attending. Hayakallah, Barakallah Fiqh, Sidi Abdulkarim. Good to see you. Abdulkarim, good to see you. The question on vinegar, we're going to talk about vinegar, so let's save it for then, inshallah. Okay, are there any other questions? No, that's good. That's excellent detail. That's excellent. Class, inshallah, will be about the same time next week. Actually, next week I'm in the UK. And I would assume class is going to be before Fajr, but I want to check the prayer time and stuff. If there's any change, I'll let you all know, but otherwise assume it'll be about the same thing. Barakallahu feekum. Okay, so inshallah, that is the third category of water, impure water, and how it becomes impure. Small quantity becomes impure with conditions by the mere contact of filth. Some things are excused and they won't make it impure. A large quantity of water becomes impure if filth changes it, though we have to be certain of the change. And that completes the third category of water. So we have water that is pure and purifying, which is plain natural water. Water that is pure though unpurifying, which is either water that's changed extremely or used water. And then the third category of water is this, impure water, and this is how it becomes impure. And then we have these types of filth, and these are things that will prevent the validity of prayer when there's no dispensation. If they're on one's body, clothing, or place of prayer, or if their ruling is on one's body, clothing, and place of prayer, which is by waters of concern. And also water is really the catalyst, if you will, in transferring filth. So that's another reason why we have to understand the rulings of water with respect to filth. And Allah knows best. Next week we'll consider with 1.15 and hopefully go on a little bit and also review a little bit. And that is how we're going to purify things when they have been affected by filth. Barakallahu feekum. And then inshallah we'll look forward to seeing you all in Nottingham as well. Oh, the difference of wadi and many. Excuse me. So we talked about what makes ghusl obligatory, and we said that that was sexual fluid or semen, if you will, and it had certain attributes, which we discussed in the section of ghusl, so you should review there. And many is and also usually we had I before the Y, M-A-N-I-Y. That is sexual fluid and what necessitates ghusl. It's pure and necessitates ghusl. Wadi is another excretion from men. It's like thick and cloudy and it comes out after urinating. And its ruling is that it is impure and it necessitates wudu. And you can review that as well as many and medi. They're all mentioned in some detail in Reliance to the Traveler. Aywa. Naam. And we're heading on up to Rabi'ul Awwal. So don't forget to send many prayers upon the Prophet ﷺ and study his seerah, and study his shama'il, and follow his sunnah, and spread his sunnah, and may Allah give us tawfiq. May Allah give us tawfiq. See, Noor, you can review the handouts about birth and ghusl. We covered that in the last couple of weeks. Please recite the last couple of lessons. Please recite Fatiha, seeking from Allah sincere, accepted works, beneficial knowledge, good teaching, inviting the guidance. And that Allah give happiness thereby to the heart of the Prophet ﷺ. And the word of this Fatiha goes to our parents, Shaykhs, those who made rights in the presence of the Prophet Muhammad. And may Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala make us from the most blessed of the Ummah of the Prophet Muhammad for his Ummah in this month, and the most beneficial of the Ummah of the Prophet Muhammad for his Ummah in this month. And may Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala make all of us keys which unlock good and locks which prevent evil. And may Allah reward our Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam on our behalf with the best that he rewards any Prophet on behalf of their community. And please donate the reward of Fatiha to the presence of the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Fatiha. Bismillah. To answer the question, no, the hilal hasn't been cited, but wallahu alam, based on my study of the subject, We're anticipating tomorrow, starting tonight, to be Rabi'a in most places in the world, though it's not likely that it'll be sighted in Australia, so they may go later if they haven't completed 30 days. And it's, make sure to wait for sightings, but we anticipate that they'll be seen, inshallah ta'ala. Wassalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.